My name is Rachel, and I have to tell you about the camping trip that took my husband's life and left me with guilt that I carry every single day. This was July 2013, and Mike and I were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary with a weekend camping trip along the Arkansas River in Colorado. Mike had been planning this trip for months. He'd researched the perfect campsite, one that was right on the riverbank with easy access to fishing spots. Mike was obsessed with fly fishing. It was his meditation, his escape from the stress of his job as an air traffic controller. He'd spent hundreds of dollars on new equipment for this trip, and he was more excited than I'd seen him in years. We set up camp at Railroad Bridge Campground, about 20 miles upstream from Salida. The Arkansas River was running high that year due to heavy snowmelt, but Mike said that would make the fishing even better. Our campsite was maybe 30 feet from the water's edge. Mike had chosen it specifically for the easy access. He could literally roll out of the tent and start fishing. I thought it was too close to the water, but Mike assured me it was safe. The river's been running at this level for weeks, he said as we set up the tent. If there was any danger of flooding, the campground would be closed. The first day was perfect. Mike caught several nice trout, and we cooked them over our campfire for dinner. We drank wine, watched the sunset, and talked about our plans for the future. Mike wanted to buy a cabin in the mountains so we could do this more often. I was happy just to see him so relaxed. The trouble started the second morning. I woke up around 6 a.m. to the sound of Mike getting dressed. He was trying to be quiet, but I'm a light sleeper. "Where are you going?" I asked. "The fishing should be incredible right now," he whispered. "I want to try that deep pool upstream before the sun gets too high." I looked at my watch. It was barely dawn, and the light was still gray and uncertain. "Can't you wait until after breakfast?" I asked. "This is the best time," he said. "Fish are most active in the early morning. I'll be back in an hour." I woke up again around 8 a.m. when Mike still wasn't back. I got dressed and walked to the riverbank to look for him. The water was definitely higher than it had been the day before, and it was moving faster. The deep pool Mike had mentioned was now a churning rapids. I called his name, but the sound of the water was too loud. I started walking upstream, following the path along the bank. After about 10 minutes, I saw Mike's fishing vest hanging from a tree branch about 20 feet out in the river. That's when I started to panic. I ran back to the campsite and grabbed my cell phone, but there was no signal. The nearest ranger station was 5 miles away, and I didn't want to leave in case Mike came back. I stood on the bank, shouting his name over and over, but the river just kept rushing past, indifferent to my fear. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard someone calling my name from upstream. It was Mike, but something was wrong with his voice. He sounded weak, desperate. I ran toward the sound and found him about 100 yards upstream, clinging to a partially submerged log in the middle of the river. He was chest deep in the water, and I could see that he was struggling to hold on. "Rachel," he shouted when he saw me. "I can't get out. The current's too strong." I could see what had happened. Mike had been fishing from the bank when the ground gave way beneath him. The river had undercut the bank, and he'd fallen into the water. He'd managed to grab the log, but he was trapped in the current. "Hold on," I shouted. "I'm going to get help." "No, don't leave me." His voice was panicked now. "I can't hold on much longer." I looked around desperately for something to help him. There was a dead tree branch near the bank, maybe 8 feet long. I grabbed it and tried to extend it toward Mike, but the log he was clinging to was at least 15 feet from shore. "You have to swim closer," I yelled. "I can't. The current's too strong, and my waders are full of water." I could see the problem now. Mike's chest waders, which had been an advantage while fishing, were now dragging him down. They were full of water and acting like anchors, making it impossible for him to maneuver in the current. "Take them off," I shouted. "I can't. I need both hands to hold on," he said. Mike was getting weaker. I could see his grip slipping on the log. His face was pale, and his lips were blue from the cold water. He'd been in the river for at least an hour, and hypothermia was setting in. I made a decision that I've regretted every day since. I entered the water myself. I waded out as far as I could, but the current was incredibly strong. Even in water up to my knees, I could feel it trying to sweep me downstream. I extended the branch as far as I could, but it was still several feet short of Mike's position. "You have to let go and swim toward me," I yelled. "I can't," he shouted back. "If I let go, I'll get swept away." He was right. The current below the log was violent white water. If he let go, he'd be swept into the rapids downstream. But he couldn't hold on much longer. I tried wading deeper, but the current knocked me off my feet. I managed to grab onto some rocks and pull myself back to shore, but now I was soaked and shivering too. "Rachel, listen to me," Mike called out, his voice weaker now. "You need to go get help. I can hold on for a few more minutes, but not much longer." I didn't want to leave him, but I could see he was right. His grip was failing, and his face was getting paler. I ran back to the campsite, jumped in our car, and drove as fast as I could to the ranger station. The ranger on duty immediately radioed for a swift water rescue team, but he warned me it would take at least 30 minutes for them to arrive. We drove back to the river together, and I prayed we wouldn't be too late. We were. When we reached the spot where Mike had been clinging to the log, he was gone. The log was still there, but Mike had vanished. The ranger immediately started searching downstream, calling for backup and a helicopter. They found Mike's body 3 hours later, caught in a strainer, a partially submerged tree that acts like a net for debris. He'd drowned, but the autopsy showed he'd also suffered massive trauma from being bounced off rocks in the rapids. The investigating ranger said Mike had made a classic mistake. He'd been fishing too close to an undercut bank during high water conditions. The Arkansas River was running at nearly flood stage due to accelerated snowmelt, and the banks were unstable. He'd fallen in, and his waders had made it impossible for him to swim to safety. "Even experienced swimmers have trouble in these conditions," the ranger told me. "The water's too cold, the current's too strong, and the waders act like anchors." He did well to hold on as long as he did. I sold all of Mike's fishing equipment after the funeral. I couldn't bear to look at it. I moved away from Colorado, away from the mountains and rivers that had taken him. I now live in Phoenix, in the desert, where the only water comes from swimming pools and faucets. But I still miss my husband every night. I still dream seeing Mike's face, pale and desperate, as he begged me not to leave him. I still feel the helplessness of standing on the bank with a stick, watching the man I loved slip away into the current. I'm Sarah, and I need to tell you about February 15th, 2014. It was supposed to be a routine backcountry skiing trip in the Cascade Mountains. It turned into the day I watched my best friend disappear in front of my eyes. Emma and I had been backcountry skiing together for 3 years. We weren't novices. We both had our avalanche safety certifications, carried beacons, probes, and shovels. We knew the risks, or at least we thought we did. The avalanche danger that day was rated as considerable in the upper elevations, which meant we should avoid steep slopes above Treeling. We thought we were being careful. We'd driven up to the Cascade River Road and parked at the winter gate. The plan was to ski up the summer road about 4 miles to where it switchbacks up toward Cascade Pass. It was a route we'd done a dozen times before, and we'd never had any issues. The weather was perfect, clear skies, fresh powder from the storm 2 days before, and just enough wind to keep us cool on the uphill. Emma was ahead of me, as usual. She was a stronger skier, and always set the pace. I was about 30 feet behind her, following her track and enjoying the rhythm of the climb. We'd been going for about 2 hours when we reached the spot where the road curves around a steep hillside. That's where we made our mistake. Emma stopped and pointed up the slope to our left. "Look at that line," she said. "Perfect powder, and it's not that steep. Maybe 25 degrees. I looked up the slope. It was tempting, untracked snow leading down to a natural bowl with what looked like a perfect run back to the road. But something about it made me uneasy. "I don't know," I said. "That whole face got loaded in the storm. And look at the wind patterns up there." I pointed to the cornice formations along the ridge. "It's been wind loading all week." Emma was already taking her climbing skins off. "Come on, Sarah. We've skied steeper slopes than this. And look at the snow quality. It's perfect." I should have insisted we stick to the road. I should have reminded her about the avalanche report. I should have turned around and skied back to the car. Instead, I followed her up the slope. The snow felt different under my skis as we climbed. It had that hollow, drumming quality that sometimes indicates wind slab formation. I mentioned this to Emma, but she was focused on the pristine powder above us. "Just feel that cold smoke," she said, kicking at the surface snow. "This is going to be epic." We climbed for about 20 minutes, gaining maybe 300 vertical feet. The slope steepened as we went higher, probably closer to 35 degrees now, but still within our comfort zone. Emma reached a flat spot and stopped to wait for me. "This is perfect," she said as I caught up. "We'll drop in right here and ski that line down to the bowl." I looked down the slope we'd just climbed. From this angle, I could see the terrain more clearly. The slope we were on was actually much steeper than it had appeared from below, and it was loaded with way more snow than I'd realized. "Emma, I think we should go back," I said. "This doesn't feel right." She was already strapping her skis back on. "You worry too much. This is why we came up here, remember? To ski powder, not to follow groomed runs." Before I could argue further, she pushed off. For the first few turns, everything was perfect. Emma carved beautiful S-curves through the powder, leaving a clean track behind her. I watched her descend about 100 feet before I started to follow. I made maybe 3 turns before I heard the sound. It started as a muffled whump, like a heavy door slamming in the distance. Then the snow around my skis began to move. Not sliding, settling. The entire slope was compacting under its own weight. I looked down at Emma. She'd stopped and was looking back up at me, her face confused. Then the slope above her began to move. It didn't look like the avalanches you see in movies. There was no dramatic wall of snow thundering down the mountain. Instead, it was like the entire hillside simply began to flow, like thick liquid. The snow around Emma's skis started moving first, just a few inches, then faster. "Avalanche!" I screamed, but Emma was already trying to ski out of it. She made it maybe 50 feet before the moving snow caught up with her. I watched her skis get twisted around, then she fell backward. The flowing snow immediately buried her legs, then her torso. I could see her arms flailing above the surface, then just her head, then nothing. The entire event took maybe 15 seconds. 15 seconds for the mountain to swallow my best friend. The avalanche wasn't massive, maybe 200 feet wide and 4 feet deep, but it was enough. When it stopped, there was just a field of chunky snow blocks where Emma had been skiing. I activated both our avalanche beacons and started descending as fast as I could. The signal was strong at first, leading me toward the center of the debris field. Emma was somewhere under there, and I had maybe 15 minutes before asphyxiation set in. The snow in the debris field was unlike anything I'd ever encountered. It wasn't the light powder we'd been skiing through. It was dense, heavy, almost like concrete. I started probing frantically, following the beacon signal, but the probe wouldn't penetrate more than a few inches. After 10 minutes of searching, I got a probe strike. Something solid, about 3 feet down. I started digging with my hands and shovel, but the snow was so compacted it was like trying to dig through ice. I found Emma's ski first, then her boot, still attached to her leg. I dug faster, following her body upward. Her legs were twisted at an impossible angle. Both femurs were clearly broken. The snow had tumbled her like she was in a washing machine. When I finally reached her head, her face was blue. Snow was packed into her mouth and nose so tightly I couldn't clear it with my fingers. I tried CPR, but her chest wouldn't compress. The snow around her torso was too dense. Emma had been buried for 23 minutes. I knew she was dead, but I kept digging, kept trying to extract her from the snow. It took me another hour to get her body completely free. By then, hypothermia was setting in, and I knew I needed to get help. The hike back to the road was a nightmare. I had to leave Emma's body where it was. There was no way I could carry her through the deep snow. I marked the spot with my probe and started the long ski back to the car. The rescue team found Emma's body the next morning. The autopsy showed she'd died from asphyxiation, but she'd also suffered massive trauma during the avalanche. Her pelvis was crushed, 3 ribs were broken, and she had severe internal bleeding. I still ski, but never in the backcountry. I can't look at untracked snow without seeing Emma's face disappearing beneath the surface. I can't hear the sound of wind without remembering that initial whump that started it all. The worst part is knowing it was preventable. We had all the right equipment, all the right training. We knew the dangers. We just chose to ignore them for the sake of a few minutes of perfect powder skiing. Emma died because we got complacent, because we trusted our experience more than we trusted the mountain, because we thought we were different, that somehow the rules didn't apply to us. The mountain taught us otherwise. My name is Marcus, and I need to tell you about what happened to me and my college roommate Jake during our spring break camping trip in Glacier National Park. This was March 2015, and we thought we were prepared for everything. We weren't. Jake had been planning this trip for months. He'd bought all the gear, researched the trails, even printed out weather reports. The forecast showed temperatures dropping to the low 30s at night, which seemed manageable with our sleeping bags rated for 20 degrees. What the forecast didn't mention was the sudden weather system that would roll in from Canada, bringing with it a hell I never knew existed. We set up camp at Apgar Campground on our first day. Everything was perfect, clear skies, temperature in the mid-50s, and Jake was in his element, setting up our tent with military precision. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and approached camping like a tactical operation. I trusted him completely. That trust almost killed us both. The first night passed without incident. We cooked over our camp stove, shared stories, and fell asleep to the sound of nature. I woke up around 3 a.m. feeling cold, but not alarmingly so. Jake was already awake, checking his phone. "Weather alert just came through," he whispered. "Temperatures dropping faster than expected. We might hit single digits tonight." I wasn't worried. Our gear was rated for this. Jake had spent over $1,000 on equipment. What could go wrong? The second day, the temperature never got above 35 degrees. The wind picked up, and by evening, it was howling through the trees with a sound I'd never heard before, like something screaming. We ate dinner quickly and retreated to our tent by 7 p.m. That's when things started going wrong. Around midnight, I woke up shivering uncontrollably. Not the normal cold shiver. This was violent, like my body was trying to shake itself apart. I reached for Jake, but he was already awake, his teeth chattering so loudly I could hear them over the wind. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice slurred. "The sleeping bags, they're not working." I checked the temperature on my phone, negative 12 degrees. The weather system had intensified beyond all predictions. Jake tried to start our portable heater, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't work the ignition. I took over, but my fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. Everything was clumsy, disconnected. "We need to get warm," Jake said, but his words were coming out wrong, slurred and confused. "Body heat. Take off clothes." In our hypothermic state, this seemed logical. We stripped down and got into one sleeping bag together, but we were both already too cold. Our body heat wasn't enough to warm the freezing air around us. That's when Jake started acting strange. "I can't feel my feet," he said, but he was smiling. "It's nice actually. Warm." I knew this was bad. I'd read about hypothermia in my wilderness safety course. When you start feeling warm, when you stop shivering, that's when you're dying. Jake began undressing again, mumbling about being too hot. I tried to stop him, but he was stronger than me, and my coordination was shot. He got out of the sleeping bag in his underwear and started unzipping the tent. "Jake, no." I tried to grab him, but he pushed me away with surprising strength. "I need air," he said, his voice dreamy. "It's so stuffy in here." He opened the tent flap, and the wind rushed in like a physical blow. Snow had started falling, and it whipped around us in the confined space. Jake crawled outside. I followed him, knowing we were both going to die, but unable to think clearly enough to figure out how to prevent it. The snow was already several inches deep, and Jake was lying in it, still in his underwear, making what looked like a snow angel. "This feels amazing," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Like a warm bath." I knew I had to get help, but my phone was dead. Our car was a quarter-mile away, and I didn't think I could make it. More terrifying was the realization that I was starting to feel warm too. The violent shivering had stopped, and a pleasant drowsiness was creeping over me. I wanted to lie down next to Jake in the snow. It looked comfortable. Instead, I forced myself to crawl back into the tent. My movements were becoming more sluggish by the minute. I found our emergency flare gun and somehow managed to fire it into the air. The bright red light illuminated the falling snow for a few seconds before disappearing. Jake was still outside, no longer moving. I don't remember much after that. I have vague memories of lights, voices, and the sensation of being lifted. The next clear memory I have is waking up in a hospital bed with frostbite on my toes and fingers. Jake didn't make it. The doctors told me later that we'd both reached stage 3 hypothermia. At that point, your body starts shutting down non-essential functions. Your brain stops working properly, which is why Jake felt warm and wanted to go outside. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it's often the last thing hypothermia victims do before they die. I survived because I stayed in the tent and because a park ranger happened to be doing a late-night patrol and saw my flare. Jake was found 20 feet from our tent, buried under 3 inches of snow. His core body temperature was 82 degrees, 15 degrees below normal. The official cause of death was severe hypothermia, but I know Jake died because we both underestimated nature's ability to kill us in a matter of hours. All our preparation, all our expensive gear, none of it mattered when the temperature dropped 30 degrees below what we'd planned for. I never went camping again. Even now, 7 years later, I keep my apartment at 78 degrees year-round. I can't stand being cold, not even for a moment. This is David, and I'm going to tell you about the camping trip that almost killed me and definitely changed my life forever. It was August 2019, and I was camping with my nephew Tyler in Big Bend National Park in Texas. Tyler was 12, and this was supposed to be a fun uncle-nephew bonding trip. Instead, it became a nightmare that still wakes me up in cold sweats. We'd been camping for 2 days at the Chizos Basin campground. Everything had gone perfectly. We'd hiked the Lost Mine Trail, seen roadrunners and javelinas, and Tyler was having the time of his life. He'd been begging his parents to let him go camping with me for years, and this was finally his chance. The incident happened on our last morning. We were packing up camp when Tyler realized he'd left his phone charger at the bathroom facility about 200 yards away. He wanted to go get it, but I was in the middle of taking down the tent. "Just wait 5 minutes," I told him. "I'll walk over there with you." But Tyler was impatient, the way 12-year-olds are. "Come on, Uncle Dave. It's just right there. I can see it from here," he said. I should have insisted on going with him. I should have dropped what I was doing and walked over there. Instead, I said, "Fine, but stay on the path. Don't go wandering off into the brush." Tyler jogged toward the bathroom, and I went back to packing. I was stuffing sleeping bags into their compression sacks when I heard him scream. Not a playful scream. Not an excited scream. A scream of pure terror and agony. I dropped everything and ran toward the sound. Tyler was about 50 feet off the main path, in a small clearing surrounded by prickly pear cactus and scrub brush. He was on the ground, holding his right leg, and he was screaming over and over again. "Something bit me. Something bit me. Uncle Dave, something bit me." I reached him in seconds, but I could already see the problem. There were 2 puncture wounds on his calf, about an inch apart, and they were bleeding profusely. The area around the bite was already starting to swell. 20 feet away, coiled in the shade of a dead tree, was a diamondback rattlesnake. It was huge, probably 5 feet long, and as thick as my arm. It was still in a defensive posture, rattle buzzing, ready to strike again. I picked Tyler up and carried him away from the snake, my mind racing. We were at least an hour from the nearest hospital, and Tyler was showing signs of envenomation. The bite area was swelling rapidly, and he was starting to feel nauseous. "Am I going to die?" he asked, his voice small and scared. "No," I said, trying to sound confident. "You're going to be fine. We just need to get you to a hospital." But privately, I was terrified. I knew enough about snake bites to know that diamondback venom is potentially fatal, especially for a child. And we were in one of the most remote areas of Texas, miles from definitive medical care. I called 911, but the cell service was spotty. I kept getting disconnected, or couldn't get through at all. Tyler was getting worse by the minute. The swelling was spreading up his leg, and he was starting to have trouble breathing. I decided to drive him to the hospital myself, rather than wait for an ambulance that might not be able to reach us quickly enough. I carried Tyler to our car and laid him across the back seat. The drive from Big Bend to the hospital in Alpine is normally about an hour, but I made it in 35 minutes, going 90 miles per hour on winding mountain roads while Tyler writhed in agony behind me. "My leg feels like it's on fire," he kept saying. "Uncle Dave, it hurts so bad." I kept talking to him, trying to keep him conscious, but he was fading fast. The swelling had spread from his calf to his thigh, and his leg was turning a sickly purple color. Worse, he was starting to have neurological symptoms, slurred speech, confusion, and difficulty breathing. "Tyler, stay with me," I kept saying. "Keep talking to me. Tell me about school. Tell me about that girl you like." But his responses were getting more incoherent. By the time we reached the hospital, he was barely conscious. The emergency room staff took one look at Tyler and immediately started working. They had antivenom on hand. Apparently, rattlesnake bites are common enough in West Texas that they keep it stocked. But they needed to give him massive doses, and there were complications. Tyler went into anaphylactic shock from the antivenom. His blood pressure dropped so low they couldn't detect it, and his heart rate became irregular. They had to intubate him and put him on life support. For 6 hours, I sat in the waiting room while doctors fought to save my nephew's life. I called my brother and sister-in-law, who drove through the night from Houston. I called my parents. I called everyone I could think of, but mostly I just sat there, replaying the morning over and over again. If I had just walked with him to the bathroom. If I had insisted he stay on the path. If I had been more careful about checking the area before we set up camp. If. Tyler survived, but the experience changed both of us permanently. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and the venom caused permanent nerve damage in his right leg. He walks with a slight limp now, and he's never been camping since. He's terrified of the outdoors, scared of any environment where he can't see potential dangers. I think about snakes every day. I dream about it at night. In my dreams, I'm always too late, always arriving just as the snake strikes. Sometimes Tyler dies in my dreams. Sometimes I get bitten too. Sometimes we both die out there in the desert, and no one finds us for days. Tyler's parents don't blame me. They've told me repeatedly that it was an accident, that these things happen. Tyler doesn't blame me either. He's actually grateful that I got him to the hospital so quickly. But I blame myself. Every single day. I still camp, but I never go alone, and I never go anywhere without extensive research about local wildlife. I carry a comprehensive first aid kit, including a snake bite kit, even though I know it's mostly useless. I have emergency communication devices, GPS beacons, and detailed evacuation plans. But none of it makes me feel safer.